why you feel the way you do. In this video, I'll be going over part 3 of Baruch de Spinoza's Ethics. If you're not already familiar with Spinoza's philosophy, then I recommend checking out the first 2 parts of the series linked here. Spinoza's philosophy is pretty complicated, and that's why I made these videos, so it's not going to be too easy to pick up midway through. With that being said, let's get right into the main theme of this section, the effects. Yes, it's spelled with an A and not an E. Why is it that way? I don't know. Go bother someone else about it. What is important is the definition. Effects are the feelings and desires that arise in us as a result of our encounters and experiences. Think about them as pushing and pulling us in certain directions, determining our actions and behavior. Another word for this is passions. Why is this? Because we are passive to the things that are affecting us. Passions or effects are not rational. They come from experience, so they're related to imaginative knowledge. It's important to remember the distinction between imaginative and adequate knowledge here. Imaginative knowledge is when we relate images in our minds from experiences that we've had. This, to Spinoza, is the lowest kind of knowledge, but it is also the most natural kind. Next is adequate knowledge that comes from rational thinking. This, Spinoza considers a higher form of knowledge and is derived from concepts that express the universal nature of all things. For a better explanation of all this, then I recommend checking out part 2 of the series linked here. So, passions are really just a part of nature, following from the same necessity as all other things. Passions form feelings because feelings are really just things in nature that have the power to affect us. Picture this. It's summertime. The sun is beating down on you with a fury like no other. You just got a triple-decker ice cream cone, and as you walk out of the store, there's a strong gust of wind, and your ice cream is now no more than a sticky puddle on the hot pavement. You're pretty pissed, right? I sure would be. The wind has affected you, causing the feeling of sorrow. What are the repercussions of this? Do you now go about your life hating the wind for the evil it's done to you? Maybe you start a campaign against the wind, seeking vengeance for your now melted ice cream. That's what part 3 is really about. How are we determined by our experiences? Or more specifically, what is it to be a finite mode interacting with other finite modes at the level of feelings? Since we're necessarily subject to passions, we can't just ignore or repress them. Instead, we have to understand both them and their causes. Like this video, for example. You can't just repress the feelings of really wanting to like and subscribe. So what are you waiting for? Just go ahead and do it. Our bodies constantly interact with other things, some of which preserve the body, others decompose it. So there are 2 ways that external things affect us, either by enhancing our ability to act or obstructing it. Thought about in this way, the effects are just ways that things change our finite bodies to increase or decrease our power of acting. You eat an apple, your power to act increases. You drink some arsenic, you die, and your power to act decreases to 0. Spinoza says that we don't have any free decisions. Instead, our decisions are based on appetites that vary as the state of our bodies vary. An appetite doesn't have to just be for food, though. It can be for anything that aligns with the basic drive for life that is in all things. Again, you have an appetite for anything that allows you to continue on living. Appetites are unconscious, though. You're not aware that you even want something. But oftentimes you do know, or at least think you know, what you want. So what is that then? That is a desire. Desires are just conscious appetites. Where do these desires or appetites come from, though? I try to keep the vocabulary in these videos to a minimum, but there's some that are essential, like conatus. Conatus is a thing striving to persevere in its own being, meaning a thing's endeavor for what is advantageous to it. Spinoza says that conatus drives everything in nature. Everything is trying to survive to the best of its ability. What is inherent in the brain is to strive for survival and well-being. The apple from earlier you were determined to eat by an appetite so that you're able to continue being. The arsenic we would be determined to avoid, because death is the unalterable decomposition of the body and the mind. Furthermore, death always comes from something external. Even age, as the environment wears on specific parts of your body. All of that to say, it is in our essence to avoid things that will degrade the body. Taking all this into consideration, to be anything is not a static state. Instead, it's the constant activity of being or actualizing what you are. A constant flux of trying to do what is good for our bodies and avoid what is bad so that we can go on continuing being human, doing human things, like this, and especially this. Spinoza says that we don't desire things because they're good. Instead, we think things are good because we desire them. I know it feels like I'm sort of bouncing all over the place, but bear with me, it'll all come together in the end. Spinoza says that perfection is the amount of being that a thing has. When we feel good, our being swells. When we feel bad, our being shrinks. The effects are just a finite mode's transition to a greater or lesser perfection, the waxing and waning of our very essence. Joy, then, is the transition to a greater perfection, and sadness is a transition to a lesser perfection. Feelings are the barometer of our well-being, that we are constantly striving to enhance. You know what brings me a lot of joy? Making philosophy easy to understand for other people. So if you want to help me pass to a higher perfection, then go ahead and like the video so that other people can see it too. So desire, joy, and sadness are the three main effects that are the basis of all other feelings. Love and hatred are just joy and sadness combined with an accompanying image of an external cause. If every single time you talk to someone you're affected with joy, then eventually you'll start to associate the feeling of joy with that person and therefore begin to love them. This can happen with anything though. It doesn't just have to be a person. Love and hatred are really just dependent on happenstance. How a thing affected you whenever you first encountered it. Anything can be an accidental cause of joy, sadness, or desire. If you just have one bad experience with dogs, that can lead to hatred for all dogs for the rest of your life. I think all of those are pretty easy to understand, but let's take it a step further into sympathy and antipathy. Our joy and sadness partially depends on what we imagine to be the effects of the things that we love and hate. Meaning our feelings largely depend on how others seem to us to be feeling and what seems to us to be the cause of that feeling. Our own joy increases if we believe that something that we love is feeling joy and therefore passing to a higher perfection. Likewise, our joy decreases if we imagine things that we love are feeling sadness and passing to a lesser perfection. Spinoza says that we'll even go as far as beginning to love or hate the thing that is causing the joy or sadness to the thing that we love or hate. Wow, we're really going down the rabbit hole now. It's important to remember that all of these feelings are based off of what we imagine. Pity and emulation are caused by the images of other people's feelings. So even if we have no reason to, we're often affected by the feelings of other people. It's like an imitation of the feelings that we imagine other people to have. Spinoza goes over 48 different feelings in the book. So if you're interested in learning about all of them, then I recommend picking up the book and learning about them for yourself. I just don't have time to go through all of them in this video. So for now, we're going to delve a little deeper into hatred and anger. We strive to do good to those we love and evil to those we hate, unless we fear that the act will bring a greater evil on ourselves. In this way, fear prevents us from doing things that love or hatred would otherwise cause. If you're walking into a McDonald's and you see someone with a gun about to rob the store, no matter how much you love Big Macs, I almost guarantee that the fear of a greater evil happening to yourself, that being either being injured or killed, is probably going to stop you from stepping in and taking on the robber yourself. Everyone's definitions of what is good and evil is different too, because good arises from whatever affects an individual and causes joy, while evil is the opposite. This leads to disagreements because everyone has their own unique definitions. Most people would agree that killing people and eating them is an evil thing, but to Jeffrey Dahmer, this is nothing but good. Taking this one step further, because effects are specific to the individual person, there are as many species of joy, sadness, desire, love, hatred, etc. as there are types of objects that we can be affected by. Likewise, there are as many different ways of feeling each of these things as there are individuals to feel them. Basically, there are as many different effects as there are encounters. It's just convenient for us to generalize joy, sorrow, love, and hatred, but keep in mind that all of these are different depending on the person. We've really only talked about passive effects thus far, which are the ways that external things affect us. There's another kind of effect though, active effects. We are active when effects follow from our nature alone, meaning we are the only cause of whatever happens. We are only able to act to the extent that our mind has adequate ideas. Because remember, adequate ideas are true ideas. Again, joy and desire don't have to come from us being acted on all the time. They can also come from adequate ideas and are adequate or complete causation of effects. This part is pretty weird, I know. Let's say that we have an adequate idea. That means we know that we know it. So the mind necessarily considers its own power of thinking, and that leads us to feel joy. The difference between passive and active joy is that passive comes from, say, eating chocolate, and active comes from ourselves alone. There's no active sadness though, because sadness necessarily involves decreasing the mind and body's power to act, something that can't come from activity purely by its definition. Spinoza says that sadness only comes from external things, and that it can't come from our essence alone. So, as long as we are the full, adequate cause of our actions, there can't be any sadness. By saying this, he's arguing that by being rational, we can largely overcome sadness. If I were to sum up this entire book into one word, it would be rationality. A finite mode is a wave on the sea. It rises from the infinite continuum of being. It is pushed and pulled by contrary forces, not knowing the direction or bigger currents that cause its movements. Eventually, it is destroyed by another wave, disintegrating back into the sea from which it came. Given all of this, how should we live our lives? That will be explored in the next part of Spinoza's Ethics Explained. Assuming you're watching this after I already have the next part out, it'll be linked right here on the screen. If not, then subscribe so you don't miss it. Remember to keep thinking deep and living well. I'll see you guys next time.